Well, hi everyone. I just got a bit of a nasty surprise. Uh, I began to stream. I usually stream to Facebook, to YouTube, and also to Twitter. However, tonight, uh, when I turned on this stream, I got an error message from StreamYard saying that I had to have a presentation account, on Twitter. I had no idea this was the case. Evidently, I have to upgrade the account I have on Twitter. I suppose I will have to upgrade that account. I suppose a presentation account is an account that's not free, that you have to pay for. Anyway, that was a nasty surprise because I had no idea such a change had been instituted, on Twitter. That said, I'm going to go on with this stream, as it is. And I know I won't be seeing as many people, but hopefully I'll begin to see some more of you on YouTube and on Facebook. And so here we are. Our topics for tonight. First, I should say this is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And I have some topics tonight. One of them comes out of a piece by Pepe Escobar. It's about the mediation that Viktor Orban is doing to try to end the war, in Ukraine. We have a second topic, specifically NATO and the Neocons within it, talking big about the war, in Ukraine. And our third topic is that China subsidies produce value, but American subsidies don't appear to do that to the same extent. So with these topics in mind, let us go forward with this stream. I'm going to share the screen for the first of our articles by Pepe Escobar. We have two tonight. First, the big picture behind Victor the Mediator's peace shuttle by Pepe Escobar. This was on July 9th, 2024. There's a picture of Viktor Orban shaking hands with Vladimir Putin, and the caption, "The big picture remains the future of the rules-based international order, quote unquote, is being decided in the black soil of Novorossiya, or New Russia, in English. Not really so new. The territories of Novorossiya were added by the Russians back towards the end of the 18th century. So they're not really so new, but there it is. They're known, as Novorossiya. They're in what is today Ukraine, or actually no longer Ukraine, but some oblasts, which have been added by plebiscite, to Russia. And then there's another set of oblasts, which, if the war goes on, will also be added, to Russia. And Those include Kharkov and also Odessa, but these have not been added as yet. They are on the cusp, as we might say. Anyway, going on with this article, Viktor Orban is on a roll. And that has set out a riotous roller coaster. Everyone has been gripped by the extraordinary spectacle of prehistoric specimens wallowing in the Western geopolitical swamp, reaching the depths of Hysteristan at the site of the Hungarian Prime Minister's pre-shuttle moving from Ukraine and Russia to China. And to do that on the eve of the 75th anniversary of warmongering global Robocop, NATO, has got to be the ultimate affront. The 3-hour-long Putin-Viktor the Mediator meeting in Moscow was quite something. These are arguably Putin's three main points. One, Kyiv cannot allow the idea of a ceasefire because that would remove the pretext for extending martial law. If Kyiv extends martial law, it will need to hold presidential elections. The chances of the current Ukrainian authorities winning are close to zero. And three, there should not be a truce for additional Kyiv weaponizing. Moscow wants a complete and final endgame. By comparison, these are arguably Orban's three main points. The position of Russia and Ukraine are very far from each other. Much needs to be done. The war in Ukraine has begun to have an impact on the European economy and its competitiveness as much as the EU leadership, quote unquote, may deny it. And three, quote, I heard what Putin thinks about the existing peace initiatives, the ceasefire, and also negotiations, and the vision of Europe after the war. Orban also made a point emphasizing the airtight pre-meeting secrecy as, quote, means of communication are under total surveillance by the big boys, unquote. He described the search for a solution in Ukraine as his, quote, Christian duty, unquote. And he said he asked three direct questions to Putin: whether peace talks are possible, whether a ceasefire before they begin is realistic, and what Europe's security architecture could look like. Putin said Orban answered all three. The clincher, not for the warmongers, but for the global majority, was Orban's description of Putin. Quote, by all negotiations with him, he is always in a good mood. This is the first thing. Secondly, he's more than 100% rational. When he negotiates, when he begins to explain, when he makes an offer saying yes or no, he is super, super rational. How else could you say it in Hungarian? Cool-headed, reserved, careful, and punctual. He has discipline. So it is a real challenge to negotiate with him and be prepared to match his intellectual and political level, unquote. That new Eurasia security system, all of the above ties up with the concept of a new Eurasia security system proposed last month by Putin, and a key theme of discussion at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Astana last week. Putin has emphasized the central role of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in the process, stating that a, quote, decision was made to turn the SCO regional anti-terrorist structure into a universal center tasked with responding to the entire range of security threats, unquote. In a nutshell, the SCO will be arguably the key node in a new Eurasia-wide indivisibility of security arrangement. This is as huge as it gets, says Pepe. It all started with the concept of Greater Eurasian Partnership proposed by Putin in 2015 and conceptualized by Sergei Karaganov in 2018. Putin took it to another level in his meeting with key Russian diplomats in June. It's time to set up serious bilateral and multilateral guarantees for collective Eurasian security. That should be a security architecture, according to Putin, open to, quote, all Eurasian countries that wish to participate, unquote, including, quote, by European and NATO countries, unquote. And it should lead to, quote, gradually phasing out, unquote, the military presence of, quote, external powers in Eurasia, unquote, side by side with, quote, establishing alternatives to Western-controlled economic mechanisms, expanding the use of national currencies and settlements, and establishing independent payment systems, unquote. In a nutshell, a complete geopolitical and technical military revamp, as well as geoeconomic, the importance of developing alternative international transport corridors, such as the INSTC. Okay, let's note here very quickly, this proposal means gradually phasing out the military presence of the United States, in Eurasia. And of course, also establishing, also throwing out, I guess not quite throwing out, but establishing alternatives to the economic mechanisms we use to maintain our influence inside, of Eurasia. Of course, this is not a prospect, and this is not a proposal that brings joy to American foreign policy. Going on, the charge d'affaires of the Russian mission to the EU, Kirill Lagvinov, tried to brief the Europeans last week under the rubric, quote, new security architecture for the Eurasian continent. Lagvinov explained how, quote, the Euro-Atlantic concept of security has collapsed based on US and NATO dominance. The European regional security framework has failed to ensure the practical implementation of the, quote, indivisible security for all principle, unquote. The future system of security and cooperation in Eurasia will then form the, quote, foundation of the global security architecture in a multipolar world based on the UN Charter principles and the rule of international law. And the greater Eurasian partnership will form the economic and social basis of this new Eurasian security system. Hell will freeze over before the EU, NATO accept the new reality. But the fact is, the already emerging mutual security space within the SCO should make Eurasia, minus its Western European peninsula, at least for the foreseeable future, more solid in terms of big power strategic stability. Eventually, it will be up to Europe, rather far western Eurasia, Do you remain as lowly vassals under declining hegemon, or you look east for a sovereign, dynamic future? The Russian plan versus all other plans. It's under this big picture that Putin's peace plan for Ukraine, announced on June 14th in front of the creme de la creme of Russian diplomats, should be understood. Orban certainly got it. Any other plans, with the exception of the revised Chinese offer, and that's why Viktor Orban went to Beijing, are irrelevant from Moscow's perspective. Of course, Team Trump had to come up with their own NATO-centered plan. That's not exactly a gift to the clueless Europeans. Under Trump, NATO's role will shift. It will become an auxiliary force in Europe. Washington, of course, will keep its nose in the empire of bases in Germany, UK, Turkey, but ground forces, armored vehicles, artillery, logistics, everything, high cost included, will be fully paid by the wobbling European economies. Under the coordination of Trump's national defense strategy advisor, Elbridge Colby, the new administration would promise to give Putin commitments, quote, not to expand NATO to the east, unquote. Moreover, Trump seems to be ready to, quote, consider territorial concessions, unquote, to Russia, as if Moscow would be praying in unison to get, quote, concessions, unquote, from a notoriously unreliable American president. The whole point of this plan is that under Trump 2.0, the main threat, quote unquote, to the U.S. will be China, not Russia. With only 4 months before the U.S. presidential election, and with the cadaver in the White House at the point of being thrown, especially by powerful donors, under the retirement home bus, it finally dawned, even on the zombie crowd, that the dream of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia is over. Still, the Dems in D.C. and their discombobulated NATO vassals are desperate to impose a Korean scenario, a sham ceasefire, and a freeze along the current front lines. In this case, hell will freeze over before Moscow accepts a, quote, peace plan, unquote, that preserves the possibility of a somewhat rump Ukraine entering NATO and the EU in the near future, plus preserving a re-weaponized Ukrainian army on Russia's Western Front. A freeze of the war now translates as a new war in 2 or 3 years with a hugely re-weaponized Kyiv. That's not going to happen, says Pepe, as Moscow's absolute imperative is a neutral Ukraine, fully demilitarized, plus the end of the official de-Russification juggernaut. Orban arguably is not playing the NATO game of trying to, quote, persuade, unquote, Russia and China to a truce, with Beijing putting pressure on Moscow. Unlike his clueless EU partners, Orban may have learned a thing or two about the Russia-China strategic partnership. The next 4 months will be frantic, both on the negotiation and the crypto negotiation fronts. The war likely will not end in 2024. I believe that, to add here, commentary here, okay, I believe that is not necessarily true. We read every day of an increasing, collapsing effort on the part, of Ukraine. No one knows whether it will hit, a tipping point or not, but it may, and it may do that soon. And it's only July. We have another 5.5 months, to go. This could tip in August. It could tip in September. It could tip before the election. I should say before the U.S. election. And the scenario, going back to the article, of a long, dreadful multi-year war may, and the operative word is may, quote unquote, only be dispelled with Trump 2.0. And that over the deep state's collective bodies. By the way, this article discounts any possibility at all that a third-party president might sneak through, especially given the mess which is occurring in U.S. politics right now, especially the chaos. We don't know the full implications of this chaos quite yet. The big picture remains, going on with the article, the future of the, quote, rules-based international order, unquote, is being decided in the black soil of Novorossiya. It is unipolar order versus multipolar, multinodal, multinodal order. NATO-Stan is not in the position to dictate any pathetic mumbo-jumbo to Russia. Putin's offer has been the last one. Won't take it. The war will go on all the way until total surrender. And total surrender, by the way, may involve no Ukraine at all. I add that. I mean, that's obviously one of the possible end scenarios here. There are no solutions whatsoever in Moscow that the collective West may accept Putin's offer. Sergei Narishkin, the head of the SVR, has been blunt. The conditions will only get worse. Putin announced just the, quote, lowest level, unquote, of Moscow's conditions. Orban may have understood that in real conditions for a peace settlement, the DPR, that's the Donetsk People's Republic, the LPR, that's the Luhansk People's Republic, Zaporozhye and Kherson will come to Russia along their original administrative borders. But Ukraine will be neutral, nuclear-free, and non-aligned. All collective West sanctions will be lifted, and Russia's frozen funds will be returned. Before any of that happens, such a long shot, Russia has plenty of time. The priority now is a successful BRICS summit next October in Kazan. New presidential aides, specifically Nikolai Patrushev, and probably Anatoly Dyumin, along with the new defense minister Belosov, are honing the big picture strategy. Meanwhile, there's always the NATO show as a sideshow, so peaceful, so benign, so democratic, such cool production values, but join the fun, says Pepe. So that's one view of what the thinking of Russia is, of its outlines for peace agreements. At this time, it's what Pepe is calling just, quote, the, quote, lowest level, unquote, of Moscow's conditions. I don't think the West is ready to accept these conditions, but it could be Zelensky is getting ready pretty rapidly. He's in an extremely tight spot. His life, okay, could be in danger with any continuation, okay, of the war. I think he really needs to see peace at this point. I think the U.S. also would love to have a peace of some kind. Would love to see the war stopping there, to try to get out from under in time for the election. But I think the collective West and NATO are stubborn. They're very stubborn, as we shall see in just a minute when we come to the next article by Pepe. So I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I will move to the next one. Oh, looks like my post has already been removed from Facebook. I got a message saying, removed your post, see why. And this is the usual thing. This goes against our community standards on spam. Are they nuts? This is spam. Oh, God. So I can take action. I can request a review. Let's see if I get to say something else. It's about an important issue, right? So they may update me in a few days, but they've been taking down my posts of late and then putting them back up, and I just don't ever know what they're going to do on Facebook these days. So I've been removed from Twitter tonight, and I've been removed from Facebook. Not exactly a wonderful night, I might add. I am currently nowhere to be found on my Facebook page. Okay, so let us see what happens here. So I am, okay, on YouTube. I'm going to continue, of course, on YouTube. Oh, there's April. Okay, Evelina is here and waves. April says at 9:07, but Steve volunteered to give you the funds. Remember? I do remember. Steve says, hello, everybody. Steve says, just got here. Andy says, hi, all. Steve says, hi, Andy. And we know that Andy is April, of course. Steve Wolfbrand said, share it to Facebook. Thank you for sharing it to Facebook. Maybe the Facebookers will choose to come over here. Andy says, hi, Steve. Joe, I saw a video heading that said a leader of Ukraine military already surrendered to Russia. It was a Ritter on McGregor video, but I haven't time to watch it. It's on my Facebook. Thank you, April. I'll be watching it soon myself. Still on my timeline, and I put the highlight on it. Thank you very much. Okay, so here we are. Now we'll move to the second, of Pepe's things. Oh, by the way, I have only one like for this. Looks like, is it a like? Or what is it? I don't understand the icon. I probably just have to look up, what it means. It's probably a good icon. But anyway, please like, share, and subscribe. It's all the more important now because I am down to one streaming platform. I'm laughing about it, of course, but I will do something about these streaming platforms that censor. The second piece by Pepe, this was done on July 11, 2024, says, headline, title of it is, "We are NATO and we're coming to get ya." Uh-oh. It's a bit shorter than the first of these was. This is Jens Stoltenberg getting a medal from Joe Biden. I don't know if that's the Medal of Freedom or not. The outgoing epileptic slab of Norwegian wood, posing as NATO Secretary General, put on quite a performance. We are the world. We are the people. We are NATO, and we're coming to get you. Wherever you are, whether you want it or not. Call it the latest pop iteration of the rules-based international order, duly christened at NATO's 75th birthday in D.C. The global majority had already been warned, but brains under techno-feudalism tend to be reduced to mush. So the gentle reminder is in order. This had already been stated in the first paragraph of the joint declaration on EU-NATO cooperation issued on January 9, 2023. Quote, "We will further mobilize the combined set of instruments at our disposal, be they political, economic, or military," italics mine, says Pepe, "to pursue our common objectives to the benefit of our 1 billion citizens." Correction, barely 1 million, part of the 0.1% plutocracy, certainly not 1 billion. Cut to the 2024 NATO summit declaration, obviously redacted with stellar mediocrity by the Americans, with the other 31 assorted vassal members duly assenting. So here's the main 2024 NATO, quote, strategic quote unquote trifecta. 1, extra tens of billions in assistance to the upcoming rump Ukraine. The overwhelming majority of these funds will be slushing around the industrial military money laundering complex. Forceful imposition of extra military spending on all members. Massive hyping up of the, quote, China threat, unquote. As the theme song of the NATO 75 show, there are actually two, apart from, quote, China threat, unquote, closing credits. The other one, opening credits, is, quote, free Ukraine, unquote. The lyrics go something like this: "Looks like we are at war against Russia and Ukraine, but don't be fooled, NATO is not a participant in the war." Well, they're even setting up a NATO office in Kyiv, but that is just to coordinate production for a Netflix war series, says Pepe. Those malignant authoritarians. The outgoing epileptic slab of Norwegian wood, posing as NATO Secretary General before the arrival of his Dutch Gouda replacement, put on quite a performance. Highlights include his fierce denunciation of, quote, the growing alliance between Russia and its authoritarian friends in Asia, unquote, as in, quote, authoritarian leaders in Iran, North Korea, and China, unquote. These malignant entities, quote, all want NATO to fail, unquote. So there's much work to do, quote, with our friends in the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific is a crude, quote, rules-based international order, unquote, invention. No one across Asia anywhere has ever used it. Everyone refers to Asia-Pacific. The joint declaration directly blames China for fueling Russian aggression in Ukraine. Beijing is described as a, quote, decisive enabler, unquote, of the Kremlin's, quote, war effort, unquote. NATO scriptwriters even directly threaten China. China, quote, cannot enable the largest war in Europe in recent history without this negatively impacting its interests and reputation, unquote. To counteract such malignity, NATO will expand its partnerships, quote unquote, with, quote, Indo-Pacific, quote unquote, states. Even before the summit, the declaration, the Global Times, was already losing their cool with these inanities. Quote, under the hype from the US and NATO, it seems that China has become the, quote, key, unquote, to the survival of Europe, controlling the fate of the Russia-Ukraine conflict like a, quote, decisive power, unquote. The tawdry rhetorical fest in D.C. definitely won't cut it in Beijing. The hegemon just wants to, quote, to reach more deeply into Asia, trying to establish, okay, end quote, Asia Pacific NATO, unquote, to help achieve the U.S., quote, Indo-Pacific strategy, unquote, unquote. So many quotes and unquotes there, I couldn't keep them straight. Southeast Asia, via diplomatic channels, essentially agrees, with the exception of bought and paid for misguided Philippines. No one wants serious turbulence across Asia Pacific like NATO has unleashed across Europe. Zhu Bo, senior fellow at Tsinghua University Center for International Security and Strategy, and a retired PLA officer, also dismissed the Indo-Pacific shenanigans even before the summit. We had an excellent exchange about it late last year at the Astana Forum in Kazakhstan. Whatever happens, okay, exceptionalism will remain on overdrive. NATO and Japan have agreed to establish a, quote, highly confidential security information, unquote, line around the clock. So count on meek Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to embrace Japan's, quote, a pivotal role in the building of an Asian version of NATO. Everyone with a brain from Urumqi to Bangalore knows that the motto across Asia for the exceptionalists is, quote, today Ukraine, tomorrow Taiwan, unquote. The absolute majority of ASEAN and hopefully India will not fall for it. What is clear is that the NATO at 75 circus is absolutely clueless and impervious to what happened at the recent SCO summit in Astana, especially when it comes to the SCO now positioned as a key node in bringing on a new Eurasia-wide collective security arrangement. As for Ukraine, once again Medvedev unplugged in inimitable style, delivered the Russian position. Quote, the Washington Summit Declaration of July 10th mentions the irreversible path of Ukraine, okay, to NATO. For Russia, two possible ways of how this path ends are acceptable. Either Ukraine disappears or NATO does. Still better, both disappear, unquote. Excuse me a second. was having a bit of trouble swallowing those pills, but they're gone now. So, in parallel, China is conducting military exercises in Belarus only a few days after Minsk officially became an SCO member. Translation: forget about NATO expanding, quote unquote, to Asia, when Beijing is already making clear it is very much present in NATO's alleged, quote, backyard, unquote. A declaration of war against Eurasia. Michael Hudson has once again reminded everyone with the brain that the running NATO warmongering show has nothing to do with peaceful internationalism. It's rather about quote, a unipolar U.S. military alliance leading toward military aggression and economic sanctions to isolate Russia and China. More to the point, to isolate European and other allies from its former trade and investment with Russia and China, making those allies more dependent on the United States, unquote. The 2024 declaration actually, the 2024 NATO declaration actually is a renewed declaration of war, hybrid and otherwise, against Eurasia as well as Afro-Eurasia. Yes, there are promises of partnerships advancing everywhere from Africa to the Middle East. The Eurasia integration process is about geoeconomic integration, including crucially transportation corridors connecting, among other latitudes, Northern Europe with West Asia. For the hegemon, this is the ultimate nightmare Eurasia integration, driving Western Europe away from the U.S. and preventing that perennial wet dream, the colonization, of Russia. I have to add that was also, a wet dream of the Nazis, wasn't it, in the Second World War? So only Plan A would apply with absolute ruthlessness. Washington literally bombed Russia-Germany integration, Nord Stream 1 and 2 and more, and turned the vassal lands of frightened, discombobulated Europeans into a potentially very dangerous place right beside a raging hot war. So once again, let everyone go back to that first paragraph of the January 2023 EU-NATO joint communique. That's what we're facing today, reflected on the title of my latest book, Eurasia versus NATO stand. NATO, in theory, fully mobilized in military, political, and economic terms to fight against any global majority forces that may destabilize imperial hegemony. Whoa. That's some tough stuff in those two articles from Pepe. He thinks there's a big war ahead of us. He's warning about that, that big war. Of course, he doesn't want, the big war. He wants the West to accept the reality of a multipolar world that is also, a collaborative world. He wants, specifically, the United States and our allies in North and South America to get out, of Eurasia and stop trying to dominate, that area. That's the Russia-China program, at this point. And the next step, of course, will be wanting the United States out of the rimlands, of Eurasia as well. The rimlands, of course, include India, various sectors of Southeast Asia, South Korea, and Japan, of course. So the geopolitical and the geoeconomic game here are very big games. They're very, very big games. And the United States wants to continue the this fight, but it is hard to see how the United States can continue it on a military basis, considering that our manufacturing capacity for backing our military at this point is greatly reduced. In fact, it is simply not there. So it is hard to see how we could be successful in this war we are embarking on, which is beyond Ukraine war. Pepe has talked about a Trump 2.0 administration seeking, a middle position here. But from the Russia-Chinese point of view, there is no middle position. There's no stabilization post-Ukraine, in Europe, at the expense, of Russia not joining China as we turn our attention to clipping the wings of China in the Asia Pacific. I don't think Russia is going to allow it to happen. And the recent alliance, with North Korea, was created to make it even more difficult, to happen, because Russia moved to enhance the military capability of North Korea by offering hypersonic missiles, which they have also done to the Iranians, and the Chinese. So that leading technology, which we in the West have yet to have, is a big card in the geopolitical game that is going on right now. And right now, it looks like the United States is on the losing side of the geopolitical and geoeconomic game. Though there are many scenes to be played out, many moves to be made, but it looks like the chessboard, the grand chessboard, is developing in favor of the Eurasian powers and not in favor of the powers of the Rimlands. So, at this point, I will leave this topic. See if you have any more comments. Can somebody tell me how this is spam? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, these people are ridiculous. I mean, this is just out and out censorship, that's all. They don't like, I think the magic words here were Pepe, Orban, Mediates, NATO, Neocons. They correctly perceived at Facebook that this is not in line with the CIA's view of the world. April says it's still on my timeline. Thank you, April. Let's see if it's once again on my timeline. Maybe they put it. Oh, you mean on your Facebook timeline? Well, it's certainly. I'll check it again and see if they put it back up real quickly when I appealed. I don't know if they did. Well, it still seems to be showing on my page. I've even got, maybe they put it up as soon as they see the appeal. okay, until they make until they decide to share it. But looking at the post itself, there are a relatively small number of views. Okay, it's about 11 views, but it is there. So I don't understand Facebook. I don't understand what it's doing these days. It's just, ridiculous. Robert says, "Can somebody tell me how this is spam?" Thank you, Robert. Yes. Can somebody tell me how this is spam? April says, "I also don't have any clicks, likes on it, though." Well, you're watching on YouTube, and there may be just a few people watching. On YouTube, Robert says, there are only 3 likes on my laptop. Steve says 4 likes. I see 4 likes. Steve says, "When I was a kid, we ate spam for lunch." Yeah, when I was in undergraduate school and graduate school, I often ate spam. Doc seems to be getting on the 3-letter radars. Yeah, I guess so. Robert Coleman. So far, Facebook hasn't taken down his live stream I shared on Facebook. Thank you. Steve says, "I don't understand why we are enemies with Russia and China." Okay, I really don't get it. Because we decided, our foreign policy people decided we had to be the hegemon here, and they developed a plan to destabilize Russia, to destroy the regime, of Vladimir Putin. And then their foreign policy aims were to break up Russia, to break up the Federation into a group of smaller countries so they could be easily more dominated by the West. That was the master plan, and one of the big goals of this plan was to make China weaker by making Russia very weak. The kind of Russia they wanted was the Russia, of the 1990s, where the West was able to loot Russia of real resources, all sorts of resources, even artistic and cultural resources, were sold at reduced prices during that period to the United States. And a lot of this stuff is here in some of our museums at this point. We actually looted Russia, of artistic things, both in the 1990s, but also during the 1930s, when there were all kinds of problems going on in Russia, and people were desperate for income of various kinds. And the United States was snapping up artistic treasures, like there was no tomorrow. Rich people here in the United States. Evelina says, Belarus also reaching out to Poland in a friendly manner. Some in Poland having second thoughts on Brussels' intentions for Poland. Yes, I agree, Evelina. That's also going on. And for Eastern Europe in general, these Europeans are having second thoughts because they're not so sure of Russia's hostile intent towards them. And in fact, if they wanted to participate in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and even join BRICS, they would probably be welcome if they want to do that. April says, everything that's going by Anglo-Western nations and India is Fasco-Nazi-esque. Well, that's an interesting term. I've never seen it before. Evelyn says, anyway, there's less tension on the border between both countries. Surely a good thing. They are neighbors after all. Surely a good thing. I agree. And Robert says, lots of people ate spam, including me. I used to eat spam. What I would do is I would grill it in a pan, and then I would top it with some cheese that I would melt, okay, in the pan, and bring the spam back. I think I even did that in the earliest days of our marriage, didn't I? Which was a long time ago. That was in the 1960s. But I would buy some spam and do that, and then put that in a grilled sandwich, and it was delicious. Steve says, Robert, it's actually pretty tasty. And Robert says that Belarus is a major ally of Russia, a very major ally of Russia. I think it's fair to say they're a Russian vassal state. Evelina says, gross, Dr. Joe. Grilled spam. Laugh out loud. Yeah, grilled with cheese. Yes, it is that. Okay. On to the next topics. Well, I think we've gone through the NATO Neocons, haven't I? Oh, no, here we go. Okay. Another article on the Neocons, okay, in NATO and their intentions. This one from Common Dreams. And this one from Julia Conley. Nope, I got the wrong thing. I don't know why I got the wrong thing. Let me see. Let me see if I can get the right thing up here. Should have it staged, actually. Yeah, here it is. Oh, yeah, that was the Jeff Sachs article. Shush that spam talk before they'll block you, Joe. Steve says, wasn't there a song about spam? Yeah. Let me share the screen here. Yeah, this article by Jeff Sachs is a great one. It's called The NATO Declaration and the Deadly Strategy of Neoconservatism. Yep, Neocons. This was done on July 13th by Jeffrey Sachs, appeared in Common Dreams. The NATO Declaration and the Deadly Strategy of Neoconservatism. For the sake of America's security and world peace, the U.S. should immediately abandon the neocon quest for hegemony in favor of diplomacy and peaceful coexistence. Yes, peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence. Yes, indeed. Peaceful coexistence. A phrase from the old Soviet Union days, beginning in the late 50s and the early 60s, people were advocating for peaceful coexistence. A good idea. Beginning in 1992, U.S. foreign policy exceptionalism went into overdrive. The U.S. has already viewed itself as an exceptional nation destined for leadership, and the demise of the Soviet Union in December 1991 convinced a group of committed ideologues who came to be known as neoconservatives or neocons, that the U.S. should now rule the world as the unchallenged sole superpower. Despite countless foreign policy disasters at neocon hands, the 2024 NATO declaration continues to push the neocon agenda, driving the world closer to nuclear war. The neoconservatives were originally led by Richard Cheney, otherwise known as Dick Cheney, the defense secretary in 1992. Every president since then, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, has pursued the neocon agenda of the U.S. Hegemony, leading the U.S. into perpetual wars of choice, including Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Ukraine, as well as relentless eastward expansion of NATO, despite a clear U.S. and German promise in 1990 to Soviet President Gorbachev that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward The core neocon idea is that the U.S. should have military, financial, economic, and political dominance over any potential rival in any part of the world. It is targeted especially at rival powers such as China and Russia. Therefore, it brings the U.S. into direct confrontation with them. The American hubris is stunning. Most of the world does not want to be led by the U.S., much less led by a U.S. state clearly driven by militarism, elitism, and greed. A neocon plan for U.S. military dominance was spelled out in the Project for a New American Century. This plan includes relentless NATO expansion eastward and the transformation of NATO from a defensive alliance against a now defunct Soviet Union to an offensive alliance used to promote U.S. Hegemony. The U.S. arms industry is a major financial and political backer of the neocons. The arms industry spearheaded the lobbying for NATO's eastward enlargement starting in the 1990s. Joe Biden has been a staunch neocon from the start, first as a senator, then as vice president, now as president. To achieve hegemony, the neocon plans rely on CIA regime change operations, U.S.-led wars of choice, U.S. Overseas military bases, now numbering about 750 overseas bases in at least 80 countries. Okay, the militarization of advanced technologies, biowarfare, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, etc., and relentless use of information warfare. Quest for U.S. Hegemony has pushed the world to open warfare in Ukraine between the world's two leading nuclear powers, Russia and the United States. The war in Ukraine was provoked by the relentless determination of the U.S. to expand NATO to Ukraine, despite Russia's fervent opposition, as well as the U.S. participation in the violent coup, the Maidan coup, February 2014, that overthrew a neutral government, and the U.S. undermining of the Minsk II agreement that called for autonomy for the ethnically Russian regions of the eastern part of Ukraine. Keep in mind, everybody, that those regions of the eastern part of Ukraine have now been annexed by Russia following plebiscites. So far, that's the result of what of the Maidan coup and the U.S. undermining of the Minsk II agreement and the fighting in Ukraine. In other words, just about all has been lost. The only remaining things to get in terms of major gains are Kharkov, and Odessa. And if the fighting keeps on going, that's exactly what's going to happen. The NATO declaration calls NATO a defensive alliance, but the facts say otherwise. NATO repeatedly engages in offensive operations, including regime change operations. But NATO led the bombing of Serbia in order to break that nation into two parts, with NATO placing a major military base in the breakaway region of Kosovo. NATO has played a major role in many U.S. wars of choice. NATO bombing of Libya was used to overthrow the government of Muammar Gaddafi. The U.S. quest for hegemony, which was arrogant and unwise in 1992, is absolutely delusional today, says Jeffrey Sachs, since the U.S. clearly faces formidable rivals that are able to compete with the U.S. on the battlefield in nuclear arms deployments and in the production and deployment of advanced technologies. China's GDP is now around 30% larger than the U.S.'s when measured at international prices. That's purchasing power parity. And China is the world's low-cost producer and supplier of many critical green technologies, including electric vehicles, 5G, photovoltaics, wind power, uh, the modular form of nuclear power, and others. China's productivity is now so great that the U.S. complains of China's, quote, overcapacity, unquote. Okay, all that is true. We should also point out that the population of China is roughly 4.5 times the population of the United States, maybe 4.75 times the population of the United States. I have to do a ratio here and see what it is. While the GDP is only 30% larger, than the U.S. So China's GDP has a ways to go before it catches up to GDP per capita, of the U.S. So I think that should continue to be emphasized. I'm not stating this as a criticism of China. China has made amazing and wonderful gains for its people. I'm just saying there's much more to happen. There's much more growth to happen yet. They're nowhere near the peak of their changes, the peak of their growth. Sadly and alarmingly, the NATO declaration repeats the neoconservative delusions. The declaration falsely declares that Russia bears sole responsibility for its war of aggression against Ukraine, despite the U.S. provocations that led to the outbreak of the war in 2014. The NATO declaration reaffirms Article 10 of the NATO-Washington Treaty, according to which NATO's eastward expansion is none of Russia's business. Yet, the U.S. would never accept Russia or China establishing a military base on the U.S. border, say in Mexico, as the U.S. first declared in the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, and is reaffirmed ever since. Absolutely. The NATO declaration reaffirms NATO's commitment to biodefense technologies, despite growing evidence that U.S. biodefense spending by NIH financed the laboratory creation of the virus that may have caused the COVID-19 pandemic. The NATO declaration proclaims NATO's intention to continue to deploy anti-ballistic Aegis missiles, as it has already done in Poland, Romania, and Turkey, despite the fact that the U.S. withdrawal from the ABM Treaty and placement of Aegis missiles in Poland and Romania has profoundly destabilized the nuclear arms control architecture. The NATO declaration expresses no interest whatsoever in negotiating peace for Ukraine. The NATO declaration doubles down on Ukraine's, quote, irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. Yet Russia will never accept Ukraine's NATO membership. So the, quote, irreversible, unquote, commitment is an irreversible commitment to war. The Washington Post reports, of course, Jeffrey Sachs is completely right in all this that we've said so far. There is no point, to disagree with here. The Washington Post reports that in the lead up to the NATO summit, Biden had serious qualms about pledging an, quote, irreversible path, unquote, to Ukraine's NATO membership. Yet Biden's advisors brushed aside these concerns. The neoconservatives created countless disasters for the U.S. and the world, including several failed wars, a massive buildup of U.S. public debt driven by trillions of dollars of wasteful war-driven military outlays, and the increasingly dangerous confrontation of the U.S. with China, with Russia, Iran, and others. The neocons have brought the doomsday clock to just 90 seconds to midnight. Nuclear war compared with 17 minutes in 1992. At this point, okay, I want to emphasize that if we evaluate the foreign policy, okay, of the neocons as they took over, okay, foreign policy in the late 80s, okay, in the early 90s, this one paragraph, okay, is a record, okay, of failure, including several failed wars, a massive buildup of U.S. public debt driven by trillions of dollars of wasteful, war-driven military outlays. Of course, from a fiscal sustainability standpoint, I don't worry about the public debt. But for those of you who do worry about, okay, the public debt and think it's very significant, the rise in the public debt is a disaster. The increasingly dangerous confrontation of the U.S. with China, Russia, Iran, and others, now that's a real disaster. Okay, the neocons have brought the doomsday clock just 90 seconds to midnight compared with 17 minutes. That's a frickin' measure of the total failure of neocon foreign policy. And that suggests that they should be completely thrown out of office, gotten rid of right now in 2024. How can we get rid of them totally in 2024? The only way is to vote against every Republican office holder in the Congress, the two major party presidential candidates, and every Democratic office holder, okay, in Congress, with a possible few exceptions, but the few exceptions are nowhere near as important as just getting rid of everybody because they're bought by the military-industrial complex, okay, or APAC, okay, and its allies, just those who thrive on war, and those who are running this failed foreign policy. For the sake of America's security and world peace, the U.S. should immediately abandon the neocon quest for hegemony in favor of diplomacy and peaceful coexistence. Alas, NATO has just done the opposite. So I can now stop sharing that. They keep telling me they removed my post, but I thankfully keep seeing, I keep seeing my post. Yes, I keep seeing my post and Evelina's comments on it on Facebook, okay, as a matter of fact, which is, of course, certainly somewhat interesting. But let me go on with our final piece. Steve says, spam was like ham in a can with some other weird stuff in there. Yeah, it was. Robert says, I will most likely be offline from August 4th to August 12th as I will be at my nephew's wedding in Colorado. Wonderful, Robert. Have a wonderful time in your trip. I hope the wedding is magnificent, and I hope you really have a wonderful time. Steve Whitmer said, I was imagine Colorado is lovely in summer. Yes, I believe it is. Robert says, I heard Elon Musk is going to give $45 million a month to a Republican PAC. Elon Musk is a piker. He is so rich, he can only afford to give $45 million a month? I mean, what is that? Come on. He's going to give 45 million more to a month. That's $180 million that he's going to give. I mean, the guy, how much is the guy worth now? $250 billion, and he's only going to give 180 million? What a tightwad. I shouldn't encourage him to give any more. I mean, look, we have an oligarch horror show here. We have an oligarch horror show here. And here is Elon obviously charging now to do certain things, okay, on Twitter, because he's got to wring every last cent out of it. Maybe they're trying to bluff you and make you take your stream down out of fear. No, I don't. Oh, you mean the Facebook people? Or change it, okay, out of fear. Yeah, they may be trying to make me change it out of fear, but they have no problem taking down Facebook accounts of people. If I keep on doing this, they will eventually take down my Facebook account or not allow me to stream on Facebook.
They don't know you're a political scientist.
They don't care if I'm a political scientist. I mean, they don't care who I am. From their point of view, I am stating views that are out of line with those of the deep state. Yeah. And they are beholden to the deep state because they have big contracts with the deep state. They're in bed with the deep state. Anyway, I will now move to the final piece of tonight. This is a great piece, by the way. A great, great piece. It's from Asia Times. Oh, maybe that's why I got taken down, because I had an Asia Times thing on here. Maybe that's what they were really having a problem with. This is called China's Subsidies Create, Not Destroy Value. In other words, what's value? The value is the evaluation that people put on the outcomes of processes. So China's subsidize certain processes, such as the production, of electric vehicles, and the outcome of those processes, of manufacturing, is valued by the population. China's EV industry would dominate the world if the West, would let it. Cash rules everything around me. CREAM, get the money, dollar bill, you all. This was a saying of Wu-Tang Clan. The Wu-Tang Clan, yes. A common narrative bandied about by the Western business press is that China's subsidized industries destroy value because they are not profitable. From residential property to high-speed rail to electric vehicles to solar panels, the subject of the most recent The Economist meltdown. The Economist had a meltdown. If The Economist actually knows better and is just doing its usual anti-China sneer, then it is par for the course and we give it a pass. But if this opinion is actually held, and all indications are that it is, then we are dealing with something far more pernicious. 248 years after the publication of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, quote unquote, and the West has lost the economic plot to celebrate Tesla's U.S. $788 billion market cap in comparison to BYD's, but that's the Chinese firm that produces electric vehicles, $93 billion, is to confuse incentives with outcomes. And we're getting to the central point just about. Both companies receive generous tax breaks and other government goodies. Well, Tesla is far more profitable than BYD, while EVs have far less market penetration in the U.S., is evidence of policy failure, not the brilliance of Elon Musk. Tesla pocketed the incentives, while BYD and its competitors delivered the outcomes. That is to say, the valued outcomes of the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Similarly, America's first solar recently became the most valued photovoltaic company as cutthroat competition in China destroyed the margins of Chinese companies. First Solar's superior valuation in a tariff-protected market should not be grounds for celebration. Despite hand-wringing by The Economist, the fact that China's photovoltaic companies are slaughtering each other by flooding the world with cheap solar panels is prima facie evidence of stunning policy success and value creation. I hope you all understand why that's true. To be unable to comprehend this crucial point is to never have properly understood Adam Smith. Quote, the wealth of nations, unquote, was never about the pursuit of profits. They are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of necessaries of life which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions among all its inhabitants, and thus without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interest of the society and afford means to the multiplication of the species. The entire point of enlightened self-interest was supposed to be the secondary, tertiary effects that improve conditions for all. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. What we want from the butcher, the brewer, and the baker are beef, beer, and bread, not for them to be fabulously wealthy shop owners. What China wants from BYD and Jinko Solar, and the U.S. from Tesla and First Solar, should be affordable EVs and solar panels, not trillion-dollar market cap stocks. Yeah, this is so right. In fact, mega cap evaluations indicate that something has gone seriously awry. Do we really want tech billionaires, or do we really want tech? What do we want? The business press has fallen into, and at best, lazy understanding of value creation. At worst, neoliberal befuddlement has damaged the brains of policymakers, rendered them incapable of diagnosing economic ills. The much heralded multi-trillion-dollar valuations of a handful of American companies, Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Alphabet, Amazon, and Meta. For those who don't know, Alphabet is the parent company of Google, and Meta is the parent company of Facebook, all of which will swear up and down all day long that they are not actually monopolies, are symptoms of serious economic distortion. How much of their valuation is a result of innovation, and how much is due to regulatory capture and antitrust impotence? It's hard to say. China stomped on its protect monopolies and now manages to deliver similar, if not superior, products and services, able to make inroads into international markets, e.g., TikTok, Shine, Betimu, Huawei, Xiaomi, at always much lower prices. Gee, Timu was actually mentioned there. The Western business press, confusing incentives with outcomes, lazily relies on stock market to determine value creation. The stock market doesn't really determine real value creation. Okay, it simply determines uh, the stock market valuations, which are not a good measurement of real value creation. That's the real point. The market capitalization of a company is important, but an entirely inadequate measure of economic value. Yes. If you do not own shares in Microsoft, the company's value is in the price and performance of Windows, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, which we are all forced to use. Non-shareholders should wonder how much cheaper and better productivity software would be if regulators actually did their jobs. And regulators have been starting to do their jobs in the Biden administration, but a great crimp in those jobs has just been delivered by the Supreme Court with its decision undermining Chevron deference. Given Microsoft's $3 trillion market cap, uh, um, um, its basically monopoly business model and how often Excel crashes, we can be reasonably certain that consumers are getting screwed. The saddest features in late stage capitalism are cheerleaders who own little equity but root for mega cap companies like sports teams. With 54% of total U.S. market cap held by 1% of the population, it's a given that these confused devotees far outnumber the real beneficiaries. Perhaps that is the end state of the modern proletariat, to be stupefied fanboys celebrating their neoliberal serfdom. This writer thinks they would be better off worshiping Elon Musk a little less and demanding affordable cars a little more, but that's just my opinion. To truly comprehend what is going on, one, of course, needs to consult Karl Marx and quote Das Kapital, unquote, which declared that people of the same trade seldom meet together even for merriment and diversion, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices. Yeah. Well, that's frequently true, I think. As soon as the land of any country has all become private property, the landlords, like all other men, love to reap where they never sowed and demand the rent even for its natural produce. Aha, gotcha. That's actually Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. That Karl Marx and Adam Smith are the same end goal seems not to be well understood. What Adam Smith got right and Karl Marx got wrong is that the profit motive can produce superior outcomes, but only when it operates paradoxically. In other words, profits need to be competed away, at least in the long term. Okay, the mechanics of capitalism are responsible for much of the confusion because the invisible hand of the market is supposed to be guided by the enlightened self-interest of participants. Profits become the focus of finance and, regrettably, economics, if only because so much infrastructure has been devoted to its measurement. With the explosion of MBA programs and undergraduate business courses, every two-bit graduate of Western universities has a working knowledge of accounting, financial statement analysis, and valuation models. Unfortunately, all of that is at best half the story. The producer surplus part of the supply-demand chart, the consumer surplus portion, is of little interest because, one, nobody's making any money off it, and two, there is no reliable methodology to measure it. Universities are not crawling all over each other to offer master of consumer advocacy programs. What China has done in industry after industry is to flatten the supply curve by subsidizing hordes of producers. This spurs innovation, increases output, and crushes margins. Value is not being destroyed, it's accruing to consumers as lower prices, higher quality, and or more innovative products and services. If you're looking for returns in the financial statements of China's subsidized companies, you're doing it wrong. If China's subsidized industries are generating massive profits, policymakers should be investigated for corruption. A recent CSIS report estimated that China spent $231 billion on EV subsidies. Well, that is certainly a gross overestimation. The think tank's assumption for EV sales tax exemption is much too high. We'll go with it. That comes out at $578 per car when spread over all 400 million cars, both EV and ICE, on China's roads. The result has been a Cambrian explosion of market entrants, flooding China's market with over 250 EV models. That's what used to happen here, remember, in the first stages of selling internal combustion vehicles. Unbridled competition, blistering innovation and price wars have blinged out China's EVs with performance features and lowered prices on all cars, both electric vehicles and internal combustion engines, by $10,000 to $40,000. Assuming average savings of $20,000 per car, Chinese consumers will pocket $500 billion of additional consumer surplus in 2024. What multiple should we put on that? 10 times, 15 times, 20 times? Yes, China's EV industry is barely scraping a profit. So what? For a measly $231 billion in subsidies, China has created $5 to $10 trillion in value for its consumers. The combined market cap of the world's 20 largest car companies is less than $2 trillion. What we have been looking at, illustrated in the supply-demand curves above, are just primary market effects. The more significant outcomes of industrial policy are externalities, and it's all about the externalities. To name just a few, switching to EVs weans China from oil imports, lowers particulates and CO2 emissions, provides jobs for swarms of new STEM graduates, and creates ultra-competitive companies to compete in international markets. Externalities from the stunning collapse of solar panel prices may be even more transformative. Previously, uneconomic engineering solutions may become possible, from mass desalination to synthetic fertilizer, plastics, and jet fuel to indoor urban agriculture. China could significantly lower the cost of energy for the global south with massive geopolitical implications. Okay, the city of Hefei in backwater Anhui province has achieved spectacular growth in recent years through shrewd investments in high-tech industries, e.g. EVs, LCD, quantum computing, AI, robotics, also memory chips. In theory, the Hefei model, where local governments operate venture capital funds, can be more efficient than the Silicon Valley's version. While returns for traditional venture capital investments are dictated by company profits, the Hefei model is more flexible. Returns can be collected through multiple channels, from taxing, employment, to upgrading workforces, to increasing consumer surplus. The internal hurdle rate can be set lower if positive externalities are part of the incentive structure. While Hefei has been hosting symposiums for processions of the municipalities, Hoping some of the city's magic rubs off, the model isn't truly unique. It is just what the China model looks like when pushed against the technological frontier. While quantum computing, AI, and robotics may be sexy, the formula is not much different from the macro China model. That is, a model that understands all facets of value creation, from consumers to producers to externalities, not a model fixated on and distorted by profits. In other words, not a capitalist model, which is fixated on and distorted by profits. So, this little brilliant article was written. Okay, I skipped the diagrams, but forgive me for doing that. I was blindsided by all the ads. Anyway, this is written by Han Fazi. Okay, I presume he is Chinese, but I think he's done a wonderful job of drawing the distinction between essentially nominal value, okay, and real value here. What the Chinese, okay, are producing in their businesses isn't simply nominal value for the producers, but it's real value or outcome value for the consumers, for those who work in the industries, and for people that are further impacted by the existence, okay, of those industries. Essentially, to put this some other way, the Chinese, okay, subsidies are producing very grand kinds of public purpose outcomes for the people of China, whereas here in this country's we subsidizes, okay, our businesses, and what we look at is the profit outcomes, and we view our success in terms of the private gains that are achieved, okay, in monetary terms by the oligarchs who run, okay, large companies. Okay, that's an amazing difference. I think it's one of the real differences between a systematic form of socialism and a systematic form, okay, of capitalism. I'm going to stop sharing this now, okay, and look at your comments. But I thought that article, that piece, was very beautifully done. And it puts its finger on what our problem is, okay, with China. They are building real value in China, and therefore they are challenging us as the primary power, okay, in the world. The real sources of power, okay, is the value that the Chinese management of the economy, okay, is creating. And the real source, okay, of our decline is the toleration here of huge profits, okay, and a few okay, a few oligarchs and large companies, and allowing those companies to restrict competition here. So we're not getting the fruits, okay, of competition. The irony in what the Chinese are doing is they're subsidizing competition all over the place. They're subsidizing a tremendous amount of free market activity, okay, that nevertheless is being managed, okay, at a macro level by the government, okay, and the Communist Party. But that explosion of competitive effort is once again developing China, continuing at breakneck speed, and creating real sources of power which can also be used at the international level to challenge the United States and the hegemony that we have enjoyed for so long. I don't know that all of us have enjoyed it. I think the oligarchs have enjoyed it. Steve says, Doc, are you not following the development of humanoid robots, artificial in? Well, I've always followed it, but not, so closely. I mean, I know what's going on. And of course, I've been reading about artificial intelligence and robots since I was a young boy. So yes, I am kind of following it. I'm following the the trends. I even have a pretty good understanding of the basics, of artificial intelligence, since I was studying it very closely during the 90s and the early 2000s as part of, my involvement in the knowledge management field. I haven't been looking at it but so closely now. But I know changes are happening very fast, and developments in the application of artificial intelligence are happening very fast. April says, unfortunately, Temu has been co-opted with or by Amazon now, and I complain because they feature much higher prices, which disturbs my shopping because I avoid all local warehouse items just because I know it's Amazon greed. I wanted $2 solar panels. I bought 3. Steve Wolfman says, I love Elon, a very strange human being. But nevertheless, an oligarch, Steve. Steve Wolfman said, I bought a solar panel. It melted in the sun. April says, it was a stellar article. I only have average intelligence, but the writing still helped me grasp the big picture. Big picture, also known as the macro level, as you just said. Yes, that was a stellar article, wasn't it? Okay, so are you talking about transhumanism? Okay, if you're directing that at Steve, he probably is talking about that. Okay, so I think that's it for tonight. Okay, I hope you loved it. Tomorrow, what we have is, of course, campaign violence, which we have been seeing. We've been seeing SCOTUS, that's undermining the very foundation, of law. The idea that everybody is equal under the law. We'll also talk about the corner post, decision by the Supreme Court, which is terrible. And we'll talk more about repairing the SCOTUS damage. In particular, there's an article by Lawrence Tribe, who has a plan for repairing the Constitution that, in his view, has been shredded by the Supreme Court. So we'll be going over those things tomorrow. So it will be mainly concerned with domestic things here in the U.S., of course, and the domestic political situation. On Thursday, I'll be covering more in the international relations field. Specifically, Scott Ritter has written about and probably talked about on his program Operation Dawn. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about a revolution in the making. Okay, in the Eurasian sphere. Okay, that's by Alistair Crook. And we will also talk about a new international economic order, which is also arising. And this is from a blog called Global South Perspectives, a very, very interesting piece. So that will be on Thursday. And that last very, very interesting piece is about, it's actually a report, okay, by Fadl Kabul as to his recent, okay, activities. Fadl, okay, is an MMT practitioner and theorist who is extremely active, okay, in developing countries and regions, and we'll cover a report of what he's been doing. Very, very important stuff. And the revolution we'll be talking about, okay, is actually the European Revolution, which is in the making right now. So that's very important too. So Thursday we'll also have a very, very important show. On Friday, I'm going back to Supreme Court considerations, so opinions on the attempted assassination of Trump, some discussions of the possible impact of the attempted assassination of Trump, and also I'll probably be talking about some of the views of J.D. Vance as well. That's on Friday. So those are really coming attractions for the rest of the week. I am now going to say goodnight. Or maybe look at some more of your comments. April says, big picture. Are you talking about transhumanism? April said she loved it and thanked me. So thank you, April. And please have, okay, a very good night. Of course, my attendance tonight is very, very down. Okay, because I think my Facebook stuff has been artificially restricted. In fact, I don't think that my StreamYard meter here is even counting, my full Facebook attendance. So tomorrow, a hopeful article on repairing the Constitution. Thank you for the show. Good night. I don't think the article is really so hopeful on repairing the Constitution. I think Larry Tribe thinks it's hopeful on repairing the Constitution, but frankly, I think his plan for repairing the Constitution is not as practical, okay, as mine is. But we will see. We'll talk about that, okay, tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for coming, and good night. I will try to get back into the good graces of Twitter, even if it costs me a little money each month. So I will investigate that. Again, thank you for coming. And I'll see you tomorrow night, at least here, on YouTube. And maybe they won't be so quick to try to take down my show tomorrow night, because it won't be about international relations. So they may not censor that. They may not. So good night. I will end the show now.